Hi everyone, welcome back to FilmGrearHQ. Do you ever have shoots where everyone is constantly checking your camera screen? Sound recordist needs to see if the mic is in the shot, makeup artist needs to see how talent looks on the screen, set designer needs to see if the props look good, and then of course you have the director constantly standing behind your shoulder checking everything that's happening on your camera display. It can get a bit crowded and also a little bit annoying, so if you can relate to this experience, you might need one of these. What I have here is a wireless director's monitor setup. While this is nothing new on high-end shoots, on low-end productions it's the last thing on the rental kit list, and most of us can't afford spending thousands of dollars on something that we won't even use but give to our director or our crew. But thankfully, things are constantly improving and getting much cheaper, so now you can build something like this yourself for under $1,000. This setup consists of three main parts: the wireless transmission system, the monitor, and the cage. The thing that obviously makes it special is the wireless transmission system, and these things are usually very expensive. You can't really expect to get a professional one for under $1,000, but thankfully now we have some options. In fact, this Hollyland Mars 300 will cost you just $499, which makes it the cheapest professional wireless HDMI transmission system. In my case, I received this for review from Hollyland as a demo unit. You can even see demo written on the actual unit. But as always with my reviews, all the thoughts and opinions are 100% mine. We will go through all of the positives and negatives as we always do. So coming back to the kit, the wireless system comes as two main units. We have the transmitter and receiver. Transmitter goes on your camera, receiver goes on your cage or on your monitor, depending how you're gonna set it up. The units are pretty nice and solid. They are made fully out of metal, so they are ready for professional production. Each of the units has two HDMI connections, but they perform different tasks. The transmitter has HDMI in and HDMI loop out, which allows you to connect additional monitor on the camera side. And the receiver has two HDMI outputs. So one can be connected to your main monitor, and then you can connect a secondary monitor if you wish to. If you look under the HDMI connections, you will see that both units have DC input. The kit comes with one power adapter, and if you're going to use this setup in a studio environment, let's say on a light stand, you can just hook up the adapter to the unit and power it this way. But if you want to use batteries, then at the back of each unit we have Sony NPF type battery plates, which is my favorite type of battery because they're very affordable and they last a long time. Even the small F550 type battery will easily last you a few hours. If you double up to the next size, like I have on the monitor, it will easily last you about 4 or 5 hours. And if you go to a beast like F990, it will easily last you all day. On the other side of each unit we have the power switches, a few buttons and a few status lights. I'm not gonna go into detail on how to set them up, but all I can tell you is that when I first got these units, I took them to a shoot straight away without reading a manual, and I was able to set them up no problem. All I needed to do was connect all the HDMI cables, switch them on, and they paired up automatically, and I was able to use them right away. So they're very straightforward in that sense, so if you're gonna rent them out or something like that, you don't need to worry about a complicated setup. As far as accessories go, you get one cold shoe mount that you will probably use to mount the transmitter on a camera. You also get one of these flat plates that you can mount on either the receiver or transmitter for a more ergonomic horizontal setup. So far so good, but what really matters is the actual performance. The key three things that I look for in such devices are the signal strength, latency, and video quality. As far as signal goes, I found it to be very good. It only dropped on me once when I first took this unit to a shoot. Like I said, I haven't read a manual, so when I first set them up, I had them next to each other, and the signal dropped, which felt like it was the result of the units actually being too close to each other. I don't know if that causes any issues, but once I had them slightly apart, the signal has improved, and I haven't had a drop since. So when you're using one of these on a shoot, you're not gonna have it next to the camera anyway. But how far can you actually have this from the camera? Well, Mars 300 stands for 300 feet, which is 100 meters, and this is supposed to be the distance that you can have between the units in clear side of view. I watched some other reviews on YouTube, and some other guys were able to go much further. as long as they had no obstruction between the transmitter and receiver. As far as the interior goes, it's very different because it all depends on where you are, what kind of walls you have between the transmitter and the receiver. So it will be very different experience for everyone. I did my own test leaving this monitor set up in this room, walked around the house, I went to the furthest part of the garden, and I took the camera to the furthest room in the house. So if you are planning to shoot in the next room, or you want to have your video village in one room and shoot outside, you probably will never have any issues with the signal. If you are going to have your video village in one building and then shoot in the next one, maybe you will experience some interference, but like I said, for me the signal is definitely good enough. Moving on to latency, it's an important question to many of us when we think about devices like this. According to specs, these devices have 10 milliseconds of latency, which translates into around 2 frames per second if you shoot in 24-25 frames per second. And really, this is almost unnoticeable. Unfortunately, camera and monitor can add their own latency. I've heard that Panasonic cameras are worse at this, while Sony cameras are better. But by the time I've connected everything up, my Sony a7 III, the Feelworld monitor, and these devices, I think I'm getting just under half a second of latency, which in reality will not be a problem to anyone in the crew. The only person that this might create a problem for is a focus puller. It's not really a focus puller's setup, but if you are going to give it to a focus puller, half a second of latency might create some issues, because if you're shooting high-paced action, a lot of things can happen in half a second. But if you ask me, I think it's still so much better to have some sort of video reference than not having any when focus pulling. So even though it's not a perfect focus puller setup, I think it can still be used for focus pulling as long as it's not high-paced action. Lastly, the video quality is also very important with these devices, because if it's all compressed and soft and weird, it's no good for anyone. Thankfully, these devices do not change the video quality in any way. It remains exactly the same as you would see if you connected the monitor directly to the camera. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this setup. Even before I got the monitor and the cage, I was able to use the actual wireless transmission system quite effectively, even with the small f5 monitor, which I took to a shoot. I've put it on a light stand, and I had literally 5 more people watching the feed from that, while I was left to do whatever I need to do on the camera side. So it's very effective for that purpose, and with this bigger monitor and the cage, the whole setup is even better. Talking about monitors, let's move on to the monitor that I have in this setup. This is the Feelworld FW279S Ultra Bright, and there's a very special reason why I've picked this particular monitor, and it's the ultra bright part. This monitor has the brightness of 2200 nit, and while it might not mean a lot to you, this is very, very bright for a camera monitor. Feelworld call it a daylight viewable field monitor because you can actually see what's happening on this monitor in a bright daylight. If you have a camera monitor already, you probably know how difficult it can be to see what's happening on the display in bright daylight. You need a sunshade and all sorts of tricks to see what's happening. But with this monitor, you can actually see so much better in comparison to any other monitor that I've tried. This is certainly the brightest film monitor that I've ever used. I thought my Feelworld F5 was incredibly bright in comparison to the camera display, and that only has 450 nit brightness, while this has 5 times more than that. So it's incredibly useful for a setup like this, because I can give it to a director and they will be able to view it in just about any conditions. So I can't really think of a better monitor for this purpose. Of course, it's still a great field monitor even for your own use, so when not using for the director, you can use it for yourself, and it has all the great features that I've mentioned in the review of my F5 monitor. So you can check that out if you want to learn about the features that this has, because they do share most of the features like false color, zoom, anamorphic modes. It also has the same build quality, it has same menus, same button layout. So you can check out my F5 review and you can learn most of the things about this monitor. The only big differences between this and F5 is that the screen is 7-inch, it's incredibly bright, and also this particular model has 2 SDI connections. So if you ever want to use this with a high-end camera or a high-end wireless transmission system, this is future-proof. Price-wise, the SDI version will cost $340, and if you don't need SDI, then HDMI-only version will cost just $260, which is very cheap for everything that this monitor is. Of course, it's not perfect. For example, it's made fully out of plastic, and maybe it doesn't feel as good as all the other parts that I have here, which are fully metal. Even though I could have bought a monitor with a metal body, I couldn't find a monitor that would match the brightness at this price. I'm sure if you pay thousands, you will be able to find a metal body monitor with similar brightness, but we are trying to stick here to under 1000, so this is the best that I could find. And I think that the cage around it protects it pretty well. It still feels very solid as the overall rig, and I think that brings us very nicely to the cage part. So the cage that I have here is the Neewer Director's cage. It's actually one of the cheapest cages that I was able to find. It's just $60 on Amazon, which is very cheap. It's made fully out of metal. It has very nice soft handles. It has plenty of mounting points for anything that you might want to put on it. In my case, the receiver. It's also very flexible, so you can put a lot of different monitors inside it. When you first get it, it comes with a back plate, but that interfered with the batteries on this particular monitor, so I took it off and I was still able to set it up exactly how I wanted for my particular setup. If you have a smaller monitor or a different design, you will be able to put it all together and fit it all inside. So definitely a very nice addition to this overall setup, and a very inexpensive one as well. So overall, I'm very happy with this setup, but like I said, nothing is perfect, and there are of course some downsides to all of these things. To start with, the transmission system, while it's packed very nicely inside its original box, I wish it came with a little case that would allow me to take out the foam inserts from the retail box and put them inside the case. Same goes for the monitor. There is no case for that, so I'm having to use retail packaging if I want to take these things to a shoot, and it's not ideal. But thankfully I have a little flight case that I had for years. It had pick and plug foam packaging inside, and I was able to design a little setup for this cage and the receiver all mounted together. I only need to take the antennas off and everything else fits inside the case, so I don't even need to take it apart. But you will need to buy the additional case, which is a downside. On the technical side, we have that latency, which is of course a little downside, but like I mentioned already, with the HDMI devices there is latency. There is no way to avoid it. If you want zero latency, you have to use SDI devices. With a monitor, there's really nothing bad I can say about it apart from it being plastic, which I mentioned already. It's not really a big deal. Most of the monitors are plastic anyway, especially the cheaper ones, so it is what it is. Same goes for the cage. For the price, there's nothing bad I can say about it. I can't even find any single fault with this cage. It's just brilliant for $60. I highly recommend getting this one for any monitor that you might get. If you already have a monitor, it will probably work with this cage, so the cage is excellent. And overall, I'm really excited to have this set up for my own use. It's well under $1,000 to build yourself. If you have a monitor already, it's even cheaper. So this is pretty much all that there is to this video, to this guide, to this 3-in-1 review of sort. If you want to check out these items yourself, I left some links in the description below. Those will be affiliated, so if you decide to buy any of these parts, you will be helping out the channel without spending an extra penny, and I highly appreciate that. I do hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you found it useful, please give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see more similar content in future, make sure to subscribe and press that notification bell to be notified of a new video when that comes out. So thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in one of my next ones.